Hi everyone, and welcome to your Week 8 lap guide for the Advanced Mazda series. This week is at Le Mans, and my name is Adam, so let's start by having a look at my hot lap. So as we approach turn 1 here, we want to open up the entry quite a lot, so we can use this sort of painted part to open up our radius, as well as the curb here on the inside. We do this to make sure that we're all the way to the right as we enter the first chicane, and we want to do most of our braking in a straight line here, which can be helped by opening up the entry for the first corner, so that we end up all the way to the right here and in a straight line. We can brake on the curb, and our braking point is just after this white line, so we can brake quite hard on the curb since it's quite flat and not very slippery. So braking quite hard on the curb and then releasing as we enter the chicane. We can use quite a lot of this first curb since the track limits here are quite lenient. But what we want to avoid is to touch this gravel here, because that's going to give us a slowdown. And the same thing kind of goes for the second part here. Just a slight release of the throttle as we go across the curb, but we can use lots of track on the inside as well as on the outside. You can see I'm using this, even putting my inside wheels on the blue and yellow curb here, which gives us lots of exit speed going down the hill here. Making sure we're quite efficient with our line here, making the track as short as possible, taking as straight of a line as possible, and making sure we end up all the way to the right as we enter this left-hander here. Braking point is sort of in the middle of between this red bollard and this access road here. So braking about here, and then releasing quite quickly as we enter the corner. We can use the curb here on the inside, as well as the curb on the exit here. So we can get actually quite early on the throttle. I'm already here, almost full throttle. And because the car has not a lot of power, we can use lots of track here, and we're still gonna make this corner here without having to lift. So we can use this curb here and make the corner quite easily here with no real issues. This final corner before the first Mulsanne straight is really important because decide our exit as well as our speed all the way down the straight. We want to just tap the brakes slightly as we enter the corner just to get some rotation, staying in fourth gear and using the curb here on the inside as well as the curb on the exit. This track limit can be quite rough. You can use just about this much curb, but if you put your inside wheels across this drain cover, that's going to be a slowdown, which is going to hurt a lot down the straight. So you want to be careful there. But basically you can use this much, but no more. If you use any more than this, that's a slowdown. And then as the straight sort of starts to curve here, we want to make sure we stay to the right, making the track as short as possible for us. And then as we go back to the straight line here, we want to make sure we're over this white line here, because the track sort of goes up a bit where the white line is. So if we put one wheel on either side of this sort of bump in the track, that's going to give us slightly less ride height, which is going to help our top speeds just a tiny bit, which is something that doesn't really make that much difference in this car, but can be good to just turn into a habit, basically. So if there's someone that you're slipstreaming and following, of course you want to follow them. But if you're just on your own, or if you're leading the pack, you want to stay in the middle of the track on this white line here. Our braking point for the first Mulsanne chicane is the 100-meter board here, and we want to brake quite hard initially, and then lift off the brakes as we enter this first part and go across this first curb, and then go back a bit on the brakes after we just touch the throttle ever so slightly between here, and then back on the brakes. But the way we apply the brakes here is sort of tricky. It can take a bit of time to learn, so I'd like to take another look at it in Delta. So here we are in Delta, looking at my inputs for the first Mulsanne chicane, and as you can see, I'm going on the brakes in sort of a regular manner here at the start, when we're still going in a straight line, and then as we're sort of approaching this first curb, I start to bleed off the brakes, and just a slight bit of throttle as I go over the curb, just to sort of stabilize the car, and then back on the brakes before this final part of the braking zone, and then bleeding off again as we enter the apex. So let's go back to the track and look at the rest of the corner and the rest of the lap. And then as we go across the apex here, getting on the throttle as we go across the curb, early on the throttle, lots of throttle, and using lots of track limit on the exit, so we can go all the way out here, almost to the wall here. As long as we return sort of before the main part of the curb here starts, we want to put our inside wheels back on the track. But basically this is the amount of track limit we can use here, which can give us a lot of speed going on to the second part of this Mulsanne straight. Same thing here, staying to the middle of the track. And then as we enter the second Mulsanne chicane, we pick our braking point sort of between this 100-meter board and this cone. So, or just before this access road you can use as well. So about here, same thing goes here for the braking. Hard on the brakes initially, releasing the brakes as we go across this curb and touching the throttle a bit. And going down to second gear, and early on the throttle here as well. You can use this inside curb as well, since it's quite flat, but you don't really want to put your outside tires on the curb, because that's going to give us a slowdown. And as early on the throttle as we can, without really using any more track limit than this. So you can go beyond this curb, and you can return to the track sort of before this little bump in the curb that you can see here. But if you go any later onto the track, so if you go like across here, that's going to give us a slowdown. So that's something you need to learn and practice, how much track you can use without getting a slowdown there. Same thing goes for this part of the Mulsanne. Keeping to the mill and just going as straight as we can. And then as we approach this hairpin here at the end of the straight, we want to start braking where the curb bends here, and we want to brake really hard, since we're coming from a very high speed. Keeping the car straight as we brake, and downshifting to first, using lots of track here on the apex, and almost touching the bollards here on the inside. And then once again on the exit, we want to use lots of track just to maximize our exit speed. We can go almost into the gravel here on exit. There's not really much to this back straight, keeping the car as tight as possible, making the track as short as we can. And then into Indianapolis, we want to make sure we keep all the way to the left before this kink, because where we want to end up here is on all the way to the right and in a straight line. So basically the later we can turn in and still hit the apex, the easier it's going to be to keep to the right and get a good entry to this hairpin. We want to start braking sort of as we get the car straight, and brake quite hard since we're coming from a high speed, and keeping the car to the right until we start turning in about here, bleeding off the brakes, trail braking, and early on the throttle, so on the throttle about here. And going as far to the right here as we can without putting a wheel in the gravel. So you can touch the gravel just a slight bit, like I did here, but if you put your entire wheel in the gravel, so like out here, that's gonna slow us down. And then into this right-hander, you can use this 50 board as your braking point, so I start braking just before the 50 board. Using this curb here, because it doesn't really upset the car that much, just to really maximize our entry, and you can use the curb on the inside as well. Early on the throttle, since it's quite a long straight, and you can use a lot of track on exit as well. So I actually went quite conservative here, but you can even put your outside wheels here, like all the way up to the wall, and it's not gonna be a problem, really. Just as long as you don't hit the wall. This straight can be quite crucial in a race, because basically on the last lap, if you're in a slipstream train, or if you're racing someone, this is where you want to make your move. This straight is long enough that you can make a move, but usually how these races go is that whoever leads into the Porsche curves is going to win the race. So this is where you really want to plan your race, so that if you're in a slipstream train, you want to be the one leading into the Porsche curves, so you want to make your final move here. The Porsche curves themselves, you want to start braking just after this end of the Astro here, the green Astro, and downshifting one gear just to get some more torque and some more rotation, and early on the throttle. Because this next left is actually quite easy, we can use quite a lot of track on the exit here, and it's not really going to affect us here. So we can go basically out here, and then back to the middle of the track, and then turning in for the next left. This is easily full throttle, You can use the curb on the inside and then going all the way out to the wall on the exit, just to also set us up for this next left, which is also flat out. But then this next right is a bit more difficult. You want to brake just a tiny bit and go down 1 gear so that you are in third. And then you can use the grass here on the exit to sort of help rotate the car and also make the track shorter, so that we end up all the way to the right as we enter the left. This left-hander can be a bit tricky with track limits. You want to lift off to basically about half throttle as you enter, and then going back on the throttle as you hit the apex. And you want to make sure that you're using as much track as you can, since the straight is quite long and the exit speed is quite important. But you can't really use any more track limits than this, because if you put your inside wheels out here, that's going to give you a slowdown, which is also quite a big slowdown, so that's something you want to avoid. But you want to use as much as you can without getting this slowdown. And then keeping the car as straight as you can, going down the straight, and then into the 4 chicanes. Our braking point is just before this curb here, or the sort of cross in the pit entry lines here. And quite light on the brakes, going down a gear, and using both these curbs here to really make the chicane as straight as we can. Just a slight bit of brakes between the corners, and back on the throttle. Then down another gear for this final chicane, where we once again want to use lots of track. You can use both these curbs here. They are quite high, so you do need to be careful on the throttle. But as long as you're a bit careful, they should be fine, and it's gonna give you quite a lot of time if you can use them. Just a slight lift on the throttle as we go across this curb here, but no need to brake really between these corners. And then careful on the throttle as you go back to the track, just to avoid this power slide here. And that's a lap of Le Mans. That's it. Hopefully this is going to help you throughout your races. If you want to use my setup while racing, you can find that on Coach Dave Delta. Any help you want, you can find on the Coach Dave Discord, and any more hot laps or lap guides you can find on the Coach Dave YouTube channels. See you next week for week 9.